All right, welcome back to the Nueva Vida Group podcast. As you guys know, we are a privately owned real estate advisory company that supports the high net worth and the ultra high net worth community on real estate acquisitions, project management, and development. Today, we're going to talk about why sports and entertainment personalities use buying agents as opposed to going down traditional methods. So, sports and entertainment personalities, Jack, what's your take?
It's an important topic, isn't it? It's something that this conversation is born actually out of a couple of meetings that we had yesterday in Manchester. But actually, if we track right back to when I started the company 9 years ago, one of our first clients was a sports and entertainment personality, and we've continued to work in that space very quietly throughout the last 9 years. I mean, for me, that sector, they experience an awful lot of exposure, and a lot of it's unwanted, in fairness to them. And buying a home can be, for them, quite a stressful experience. So, the areas that are obvious are privacy and security, but it's worth explaining sort of like why, where the value add comes from using a buying agent if they are in that sector on those two fronts. So privacy is a really good example, is that if, we're searching for a sports and entertainment personality, not only do the people we're working with that are selling homes have to sign an NDA, the name is often not disclosed to sellers. And if it has to be if it has to be shared with sellers, then the sellers also have to have an NDA signed. You know, it's a matter about ensuring that they can sort of operate and move around and buy homes without, from simply like a negotiating standpoint, is a good one. If people think that person has more money because they are a sports entertainment personality, often it's harder to negotiate a price down to a level that we're prepared to buy it for. Simple things like that, really. And then on the security front,
Yeah.
it's in the press an awful lot, and it's something that we've had a lot of exposure to. It, you know, these homes do unfortunately get broken into often when, for example, football players are playing football. If they're away, it's very obvious there they are for 90 minutes on the pitch.
Yeah.
It's unlikely there's someone at home. So the security of that property has to be, absolutely paramount, really.
Yeah, I think another thing as well is time. I mean, a lot of these sports and entertainment personalities, they have zero time. I mean, take a footballer for example. Their calendar, 52 weeks of the year. I'll probably say at least 40, 42 weeks of the year. They are they're contractually obliged to perform their roles. So they have no time. And then in the off season, they're going to be resting, traveling with family and friends around the world. So, allocate
Mm.
you know, at the very least a month or a couple of weeks is a massive ask. So that's a reason why they do employ buying agencies,
Well,
because we can start the process earlier in the year or towards the end of the year and
yeah.
really get all the legwork done.
I think on the time front as well, you're right. Protecting their time is paramount.
Yeah.
So, they employ us to do all of that legwork and get everything organized and ready, and then also manage the purchase. The other thing is they're majorly globally mobile, aren't they? If you take a footballer as a good example, because that's a space where we do an awful lot of work in the football world. They have to sometimes change their plans pretty quickly. Come a transfer window, it's not always the case that they're going to renew contracts or stay in the UK, or even stay in, a good example is staying in Surrey. They might move up north or vice versa. So I think sports entertainment personalities use services like ours, and we know this from our own experiences, because we're able to help them navigate that. They get a lot of support from the clubs, but they also get a lot. They also need their own support to help them do that. And something we've discussed a lot is that ecosystem around our business to support those globally mobile clients. We work with brilliant moving companies, tried and tested and trusted by that sector. We work with, at the meeting we had yesterday with our insurance broker, we work with people that really understand the consumers. So I think now, especially more than ever, in this sort of hyper focused world where everyone seems to have so much exposure, such little time, that sports entertainment personality they and their families really do need the support of a buying agent. Um,
Well, they are literally jumping off a plane. They're finishing their season. They're finishing maybe holiday four. Where they've just been, say, to, I don't know, America, south of France, Marbella, and then they're finally moving to their destination. So they'll be fresh off a plane, and they need the house operational. They need everything.
mm,
You need to have the security in place. You need to have gardeners, handyman, everything ready. If there's little final tweaks that need to be done, you may have a couple of children. You need to have pool safety equipment. All these little things, which are minute details, which they have no time for. So obviously that's where we come in and we deal directly with their, 9 out of 10, they have a small team around them which we're dealing with that kind of manage all these intricacies and details. But it is just saying that there is zero time available for them to think about any of this. So that's
mm.
why we position ourselves and so we can take care of all this for them.
Yeah, but and also support their spouses.
Yeah,
Often they're busy playing, or it's important to say we don't just work within the football industry on sports and
yeah,
entertainment. We work with people in the rugby world, cricket, boxing, various sports, as well as those that are in the public eye for different reasons. And often their spouses are sort of kind of left at home, or
mm,
they've kind of got to pick up the pieces. So the player might, for example, move to, let's say they move from Surrey to Manchester. They'll often have to move sort of, well, the player will have gone in advance because they'll already made the move and gone. The family sort of follow suit. So the spouse needs to obviously focus on the kids and making sure the kids have settled if they have children and pets, like really simple, important things, because they need to create that environment around their partner that's sort of stable and organized. And then, to bolt onto that, the process of looking for a new home, it can be extremely stressful. And we don't always buy, often we rent, don't we, for our clients.
yeah.
They might rent for a few years if they know they're on a couple of year contract. They don't always buy, but
Waiting for a few years, it could be for 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then
yeah,
the time's even shorter. And also, these things are sprung on last minute, as we all know, with last minute things. So then, it's still moving a significant house and all the, all the processes that come with that for the family as well. So, buying a home, but also doing a last minute rental, they still need to transfer all the existing services, all the, the existing setups that they have in the previous house going to their new one, be it for a couple of months. So it's the exact
yeah.
same process.
And I think also it's important to remember that, it's not always, what people had in mind. So they've also got to try and settle into a new area.
Yeah,
Yeah, they might have really sort of settled into, I don't know, say they were in Madrid. They might have really settled into life in Madrid, and suddenly an opportunity comes up to go back to the UK, back living in London. There is a journey there that has to take part. I think now in this world, as I've said it already, that the privacy and discretion is probably the most biggest value add that type of client will benefit from if they're using
yeah,
a highly respected buying agent that can operate, at the very top level. I think now more than ever that is just so, so, so important.
yeah. Completely agree.
One of the things that's worth discussing is obviously you've, worked closely with player liaison officers that are based in the clubs
Yeah,
themselves. What's that dynamic, and what do they do for the players?
yeah. I mean, they essentially, between the liaison manager and the sports personalities individual team, they cover everything. So everything that you can think of is normally dealt between an inner circle. So in the experiences I've had with them, and it's very much an extension of the client itself. So they will just clearly dictate. For an example, it was an apartment, so they just said this is what we need it to be. This is kind of the area we want and the style. So then it's just about that, then us implementing our process and then speaking back to the liaison, the player liaison officer, and then going from there really. So it's just working with a point of contact that represents the client itself.
Yeah, no, it's a good. I mean, those the players really lean on their player liaisons, don't they? In our
Yeah, you'll
experience.
be mad. Some of the things, it's funny, but you got to remember these, mega superstars. They have no time for anything like you can say a normal person would have to experience. So, you know,
Yeah,
contracts. things like that. Setting up a phone for abroad. Say if you're moving from the UK to Spain, it's about getting a new SIM card. All these types of things are all dealt directly within the inner circle of the
Play.
players
Yeah.
via liaison managers, and they'll have their own liaison. Clubs and liaison managers have their own outreach for things that they do, but there are lots of things that they haven't got, which is then obviously
Mm.
come in. So
The other thing as well that, we don't just deal with personalities that are, especially in the sports world, that are still playing.
yeah,
So we do a lot with personalities that have come towards the end or are thinking towards the end of their career, and are now looking at buying a holiday home
yeah,
or property investment. They're sort of looking for that oversight and that sort of individual or business that can support them in what they want to do. We often speak to and have dealt with football players that have come to the end of their career, love their golf for argument's sake, and now want to buy a holiday home in southern Spain or Portugal.
yeah,
Or they've had a holiday home, but now they want to sort of upgrade that to a permanent home, and they're going to spend a lot more time there. And quite common within property, if you're able to, you sort of get a bit of a bug for it, don't you? And we have done investments and projects with sports entertainment personalities that have come off the back of buying their sort of holiday home for them. So I think they equally want privacy, security, a trusted partner, someone that they know has an ecosystem around their business that can handle every aspect for them. It's a really important sector, really. And I think I think now we're seeing that increase for us quite significantly, the number of people we're engaging with in that sector, because they're wanting that trusted opinion and that sort of more boutique private approach, aren't we?
yeah. I definitely. I just to summarize this. I think the three key things is privacy, security, and time. I mean, ultimately, those are the three most important things. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Any questions or anything that we can help with, just drop us an email and we'll get back to you. Thanks.